Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican 20 Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider, a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 288 in Recovering Presbyterian Ordinis. 16 on priestly celibacy is a gift. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about the priests need to trust God and operate obediently with the church under her hierarchy. Today we are continuing chapter 3 on the life of priests, and we are concluding. No, we're not concluding. We are getting close to the end. We're continuing section 2 on the special spiritual requirements of the life of a priest. I wasn't sure if we're done. So the summary of today is the celibacy is a gift for the priesthood to dedicate ourselves to the mission and the life of the resurrection. So paragraph 16 here, it has 3 subparagraphs, A, B, C. They're all on the longer side, but we can get straight into them. A is about celibacy in the priesthood should be embraced as a gift. B, celibacy allows us to be more fully dedicated to our priestly mission. C, celibacy was mandated later in church history, but Vatican II reaffirms this and exhorts priests to be faithful. Because some people thought that we would change it even back then. You know, the kind of stories you hear today, they were back in the 60s too. So let's read 16a. A, celibacy is to embrace and esteemed as a gift. Perfect and perpetual continence for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, commended by Christ the Lord, and through the course of time as well in our own days, freely accepted and observed in the praiseworthy manner by many of the faithful, is held by the Church to be of great value in a special manner for the priestly life. It is at the same time a sign and a stimulus for pastoral charity, and a special source of spiritual fecundity in the world. Indeed, it is not demanded by the very nature of the priesthood, as is apparent from the practice of the early Church and from the traditions of the Eastern churches, where besides those who will, with all the bishops, by a gift of grace, choose to observe celibacy, there are also married priests of highest merits. This Holy Synod, while it commends ecclesiastical celibacy, in no way intends to alter the different discipline which legitimately flourishes in the Eastern churches. It permanently exhorts all those who have received the priesthood and marriage to persevere in their holy vocation, so that they may fully and generously continue to expend themselves for the sake of the flock commended to them. This paragraph is pretty powerful, this whole paragraph, but part A we can see, and that first sentence really sets the theme. Celibacy is to be embraced and esteemed as a gift. This is what we are. We embrace it as priests. It is a gift. It allows us so much freedom. It allows us to really live a full life in a way that's quite different. And it's a great value for the priestly life. We're going to see the next one. It allows us much more freedom for ministry, much more freedom for prayer, things like that. And it's a stimulus for charity. We don't have a family, so it takes priority. One of the things you talk to people who in Eastern churches, whether Catholic or Orthodox, there's always a challenge between the priest's parish and their family, and the family has to take priority. So sometimes certain things you would expect a Roman Catholic priest to do, an Eastern Catholic or Eastern Orthodox priest can't, because they have to prioritize the family. And that's really normal if you're a married man. But we in the Roman Catholic Church keep celibate priests so that the priest can be more fully dedicated in that way. And it is noted here that this is not intrinsic to the priesthood. We have this wonderful tradition in the East. I've known several married priests, especially Maronite and Ukrainian Catholics, and they're wonderful. It's great to have them. It's great to see them. They're great ministers of the gospel. And at least in theory, it's possible in certain cultures in Roman Catholicism. I don't think it's the right move for our culture, but I don't claim to be an expert in the different cultures of Africa or Asia. And if all the bishops of a particular country wanted to embrace it or wanted to embrace married priests, it would be something that I think would be worth studying by the Vatican. This is more of just me not admitting my own ignorance of the details of other cultures, because I spent all of my life except for 3 years in Canada and the U.S., and those 3 years I was studying theology in Rome. And so I understand these cultures much better than others. And there's great merit in that Eastern practice, and the Vatican Council here wants it to persevere. When it says this sacred synod, it refers to the Second Vatican Council, obviously. Although they use synod and council here interchangeably, is that the best thing? Maybe not, but that's what they do in the text. And this is important. So it is important that we have married priests, but it's also important that we in the Roman Church maintain our discipline of celibacy, which is good for us as priests and good for all of you as the faithful. Let's move on to B, which talks about how celibacy allows us to be more fully dedicated to our priestly mission. B, indeed, celibacy has many facets of suitability for the priesthood. For the whole priestly mission is dedicated to the service of a new humanity, which Christ, the victor over death, has aroused through his Spirit in the world, and which has its origin, not in blood, nor in the will of the flesh, nor in the will of man, but of God. John 1. Through virginity, then, or celibacy observed for the kingdom of heaven, priests are consecrated to Christ by a new and exceptional reason. They adhere to him more easily with an undivided heart. They dedicate themselves to more freely in him, and through him to the service of God and men. And they more expeditiously minister to his kingdom and the work of heavenly regeneration. And thus they are apt to accept, in the broad sense, paternity in Christ. In this way, they profess themselves before men as willing to be dedicated to the office commended to them, namely to commit themselves faithfully to one man and to show themselves as a chaste virgin of Christ, and thus to evoke the mysterious marriage established by Christ and fully be manifested in the future in which the Church has Christ as her only spouse. They give, moreover, a living sign in the world to come by faith and charity already made present, in which the children of the resurrection neither marry nor take wives. So the first practical reason given here is this idea that celibacy allows us to dedicate ourselves more fully to ministry, to charity, which is a good thing. But I think some people just leave it at this practical level, and that's not really where we are talking about it. We are more able to take on our spiritual paternity as fathers. We call priests father because they have that spiritual paternity. Paternity just meaning like fatherhood, right? And we have this deeper reason being united with Jesus, becoming like Jesus. Jesus was chaste, obedient, and poor. And those are the three evangelical counsels that all priests are meant to embrace. Obviously, we as religious make vows of poverty and obedience, and Dawson priests only make promises of those two. But that's still the ideal which we want to live. And it allows us to be undivided in our hearts for Jesus. And this allows us to continue to be faithful to all the aspects of our vocation. And finally, it talks about here that we are children of the resurrection. In the resurrection, there's neither giving nor taking in marriage. And we, as Catholic priests and as religious, are signs of that world to come. We present a sign for the world to come. We look forward to this, and we present these signs so that people can do that. John Paul II in Theology of Bodies talked about this extensively, and it's a wonderful thing to think about how the religious are in a way already living in the afterlife, already presenting this life to come to the people here. Hopefully, we as priests and religious are so happy, so wonderful that we really present it not just as kind of theory, but in practice. So let's move on to our last subparagraph, 16c. Celibacy was mandated later in church history, but Vatican II reaffirms this and exhorts priests to be faithful. Let's read it. C. For these reasons, based on the mystery of Christ and his mission, celibacy, which was first recommended to priests, later in the Latin Church was imposed upon all who were to be promoted to sacred orders. This legislation, pertaining to those who are destined for the priesthood, this Holy Synod again approves and confirms, fully trusting this gift of the Spirit so fitting for the priesthood of the New Testament, freely given by the Father, provided that those who participate in the priesthood of Christ through the sacrament of orders, and also the whole Church, humbly and fervently pray for it. This sacred synod also exhorts all priests who, in following the example of Christ, freely receive sacred celibacy as a gift of God, that they magnanimously and wholeheartedly adhere to it, and that persevering faithfully in it, they may acknowledge the outstanding gift of the Father, which is so openly praised and extolled by the Lord. Let them keep before their eyes the great mystery signified by it and fulfilled by it, insofar as perfect continence is though by many men is thought by many men to be impossible in our times. To that extent, priests should all the more humbly and steadfastly pray with the Church for the grace of fidelity, which is never denied to those who seek it, and use all the supernatural and natural ends available. They should especially seek lest they omit the ascetical norms which have been provided by the experience of the Church, and which are scarcely less necessary in the contemporary world. This Holy Synod asks not only that priests, but all faithful, that they might receive this precious gift of priestly celibacy in their hearts and ask of God that he will always bestow this gift upon the church. That paragraph is quite a mouthful. One of the things that starts out with it talks about the history. So at the first, it was recommended. And it was recommended right from St. Paul, who says, I wish all could be like me, who was celibate and things like that. But then in the late 11th century, Pope Gregory VII, who reigned from 1073 to 1085, he imposed what's called the Gregorian reforms. And what his goal was there was a lot of corrupt clergy who would have scandalous relationships with women and things like that, and places where it'd be passed on as a father to son, and that would lead to more corruption, things like that. And so he really insisted on a number of reforms. There are a bunch of other ones, like how secular rulers were trying to install bishops that they liked and things like that. But for our discussion today, one of the important ones was he insisted on clerical celibacy, and it became the norm of the Western Church at this time. And Vatican II is going to reaffirm this. It is good for us. It is good for the New Testament because we want to be like Jesus. Jesus was celibate, and we as Catholic priests, being other Christs, are celibate as well. And what do? We live it as a gift. We want to be faithful. We want to receive it as this wonderful gift. Now, obviously, marriage is also a wonderful gift. I have pictures, as I'm recording this, I'm in my office, and I have pictures of my sisters and their kids and husbands here. And it's great to see that, and that's a gift too. But for me, this was the gift that God called me to. And if we see how great it is, we realize it is that presentation of the life to come here on earth. And that's where it's so wonderful. So today, it can sometimes seem impossible, sometimes seem impossible to live celibacy. That difficulty, even in living that kind of chastity before marriage young people have, I think we need priests to model it so that young people feel like they can do it for the decade or 20 years between when they start having, desires in their mid-teens or mid-early teens, and when they get married, maybe in the mid-20s to early 30s most of the time. Most people I've known have gotten married and things like that, right? And those type of things are helpful in that in helping people out to realize that and helping them look toward the resurrection, the afterlife, and that life that way. And we need the ascetical norms also to help us in that. We can't just say, hey, do nothing. No, we need to practice ascesis, to practice all the virtues that help with this virtue of chastity. And we should all embrace celibate priests, even those who are not celibate, who are married or who are, single and chaste, not having any sexual relations, but hoping to have some with a spouse come down the road, to embrace the celibacy and the priesthood and see how great it is, see how much a gift it is, especially a gift for all of you, that you have these priests who are so dedicated to our ministry and so dedicated to help you and bring you Jesus and bring Jesus to you. So that concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. I do this podcast on a volunteer basis. My local religious community relies on donations to help pay our bills. If you want to support my community, you can donate, and you can do that at patreon.com/frmatthewlc. There's also a link both to that and to a one-time donation on my own website, frmatthewlc.com. And you can donate to support StarQuest at sqpn.com/give. Tomorrow we'll continue with the next paragraph of Presbyterium Ordinis 17 on priestly poverty is a gift. So we will have covered the three vows, the three evangelical councils yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provides a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. And there you'll find things like playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. Amen.